another episode of Words That Kill. And today our topic is killing off family. And our guest author today is fantasy author Bobbi Schemerhorn. And I'm going to turn it over to her and let her introduce herself. So take it away.
Hi, I'm Bobbi Schemerhorn. I am a indie author and I enjoy writing in the fantasy genre along with some of the subgenres of low fantasy, contemporary, and a little bit of portal.
Okay, so we'll start it off by asking, how do you craft a family killer? Do you like to go with the murderous revenge motive, or are the poor innocent family just bystanders that get caught in the crossfire?
I would prefer to have it so that it's not a oopsie, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. For me, there has to be a purpose behind the death. So if you're going to kill a family member off, there has to be someone else to either I'm going to avenge you or it pushes them into a different situation. I just killing someone off to kill them off, I don't think it helps the story in any way.
Okay, so when you're killing off family members, have you ever done it as part of bigger events like a plague or a disease or some sort of accident that has consequences for the plot?
In Mechanical Dragons, Kaylee, the main character, her parents were killed, tortured and killed to find out where she was because they had discovered that she had magic. So I used that as a way to push Kaylee into taking action of getting out of the house and realizing what she has is dangerous and finding out who did this to her family and trying to stop them from doing it to other families.
Okay, so that's a good segue into the next question, which is family deaths as protagonist motivation. And there's two parts to this question. And the first part is, um, when you're using it as motivation, do you prefer to use it as a way to start the story, like they're doing a quest, they're leaving home, or do you prefer to do it as something so more of like they're out to avenge the family? This is their personal quest.
I'm not much for the revenge. I liked the death happened, which is the catalyst of them taking action into ensuring that it doesn't happen to somebody else or they're protecting themselves in the process. With Mechanical Dragons, Kaylee finding her parents dead, it was her wake up call that there was real danger. So it wasn't just, she wasn't avenging her family. It was her realizing that who the people who are chasing her is a danger to everyone. So her quest became about saving the world instead of just avenging her family alone. And I feel that that revenge gonna kill you because you killed my those who love me is very worn out, very overused, and I feel that it becomes just a chaotic, bloody mess because all you're doing is killing everybody that comes in your path that may have had something to do with of your family member. And so when you don't use it as a revenge, it in your writing, it allows you to have more subplots and offshoots of the consequences of that particular death and what Kaylee would have to do to get over and move past what's happened to her. And it pushes her to find these people who have done this so they don't do it again to someone else. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. So when you were writing the scene where she finds out her parents have been killed, how did you approach that?
She was actually being chased down. The premise is that she had built these mechanical dragons, and without knowing, she had brought them to life. They became flesh and blood. And one of the dragons, the water dragon Sumora, showed up at her college, and everybody noticed that there's a dragon in the window. What's going on? And that's when she realized, okay, we're in trouble now because the school was being attacked by the people who were searching for her magic. And when she escapes the school to get home and being chased down, she gets home, and that's when she finds her parents in the kitchen and had been brutally tortured. The antagonists were trying to figure out where Kaylee was. And so Kaylee's realization was, this is a lot worse than I thought it was. Now my parents are gone. Her mom knew that she had magic and had to protect her for that. So I approached it in the reality of it for her, it didn't become so dangerous until she realized what these people were willing to do in order to stop magic from happening. And so that's, I approached it as a, she never thought that this could happen in her world. And not only did it happen in her world, but it happened to both her parents and in their home of all places. So
In the aftermath of the death, of course, I'm assuming she has some sort of guilt as well as grief. So, but how does she go about rebuilding her life and finding a new family, as it were? I'm assuming in part she's supported by the dragons she created.
yes, the dragons became her children in a lot of ways because she had created them, but she had a friend who was her partner who created the dragon, the mechanical part of the dragon originally, and he had warned her that, there's magic in the world, and she didn't believe him. And so 5 books in the series is her on the run. It's her and her 2 companions and her dragons are on a run, so they never really find a home. But in their adversity of seeking shelter and seeking and hiding from the people who are trying to kill them, they bond in a very different way. They went from being, okay, well, you're an acquaintance, or with Kaylee and Jahala, they did not like each other, and they became very much like sisters. And it was how she had found family. All 3 of them found family in each other because they were the only people they could trust in this situation. It wasn't until the end of book 4 that they finally were what they thought was the end of the war, and could find peace and set up a house and live normal lives. But they themselves, those 3 of them, became bonded along with her 5 dragons, and they became a family because of the adversities they had faced.
Okay, so what were some of the long-term consequences of the death on your protagonist that you wanted to explore?
Well, it's a lot of shell shock. She did see rather grotesque displayed, their eyes removed. It was very graphic in her finding them that way. And so she had to, in nightmares, and having that guilt of, I did this. If I would have just protected everything better, if I would have just figured out the magic before it got out of hand, then my parents would still be alive. And so she carried a lot of that, and that's what pushed her into going, I don't want anybody else to go through this. This isn't what I don't want. I don't want anybody else to suffer in the same way. So there was a lot of survivor's guilt, I guess you would call it, survivor's guilt, and a little bit of PTS in the process, because, you know, you don't see something like that and not be affected by it in the long term.
Mm. So what was the cost to her, not only emotionally, but in terms of her life falling apart?
I would think that the cost was that she had nowhere to go. There was nowhere that they could stay longer than a week or 2 before they were found again. So the cost was stability. She really had no stability. And when you have no stability, sometimes that can drain hope. And when you have no hope, then you feel like, what's the point? Why am I doing this? Why am I moving forward? And so she had to consistently remind herself that there's a purpose and that she had a purpose. So the cost, I think, was the stability and the threat of her losing hope in that there's a solution and that they will get out of this, that things will get better, that life will get better, that the war will come to an end. So I think that was the cost for her.
Mm. Well, I'm assuming, without spoilers, that you did resolve these issues. Are you planning on exploring her story further, or are you just going to leave her with a happy ending, or as happy as you made it?
The book 5 does not end with so much of a happy ending. There is a book 6 in the making that will put, without spoilers, there's Kaylee does find a husband and has children and or has a child and discovers that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and she's faced with a hard decision on whether or not trying not to spoil things. um, Book 6 explores her responsibility to the world and not necessarily to herself and her own family, if that's
Intriguing. Yes,
you
very.
know, that helps. I'm really trying not to, but like if you've read book 5, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Uh, Hannah, who's Kaylee's daughter, has Kaylee's gifts as well. And like I said, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And at a very, very young age, Hannah learned that she had these very special gifts and does not necessarily use them in the most purest way. And Kaylee and her extended family are forced to make a difficult choice. And it's in book 6 that we find out what that choice is and the damages that Hannah may have created. So there's not necessarily, as much as I wanted to give them all full on happy endings and everything else, I couldn't. And they all suffer from different ailments, from PTS from the long war and physical issues and whatnot. So it'll be an interesting journey in book 6 for both emotionally and that whether or not their happy endings eventually do come to them. But I can't promise anything.
Well, we're not one for happy endings on this show either.
No.
Parents versus children, which is harder to write? I know, I'm not sure if you've killed off a child or planning on it, but you've definitely killed off parents, and your protagonist has children, so I'm assuming that you could imagine killing off those characters. So what, in your opinion, would be the harder, and how do you think the readers would react to both?
I have killed off a child in the Young Chronicles. She was not a main character. She was a secondary character, which was a plot push for the main character in that series. It was incredibly difficult. It was a very difficult scene to write, even harder to re-edit it several times. I would much rather kill off a parent than a child. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's a psychological reason for that. It just the thought of the loss of a parent losing a child is, for me, devastating. It's the wrong order of life. It's the wrong way things are supposed to go. A parent is not supposed to outlive their child. And I think that it's going to be something I have to face in the future books for Mechanical Dragon. And I don't know if I will be able to actually move forth with it, move in it, because having to put myself in my character's positions when it comes to these really highly emotional scenes. And I don't know that I can personally put myself into Kaylee's shoes if she has to kill Hannah. And I'm not saying she is, there's no spoilers here, but it's the wrong order. It's not supposed to happen that way. And I know that these are fantasy and they're not real, but still you have to write it and you have to believe what you're writing. And it would be an incredibly emotional and difficult thing for me to write, let alone have my readers read it and go through it. And I guess, if I can devastate them in the writing, then I'm doing it right. But I don't know if I can actually do that kind of writing. Like, it's cruel.
Okay, so speaking of the readers, do you consider their reactions? Do you tone things back? I mean, how do you go about that?
I go full force. I don't hold back. because if I'm not crying on this end of the keyboard, then the person reading the book isn't going to be crying. If I'm okay with, hey, I'm just gonna, knock this guy out and whoo, out he goes, then that means that the people reading the story won't feel that loss as well. I want the readers to feel the loss as much as I did killing them off. And if it doesn't mean anything to me, it's not going to mean anything to them. And that means that I haven't done my job as a writer. I haven't connected enough with the reader, because I don't just like secondary characters, I knock them out on a regular, oh, okay, you're gonna die, bye. But main characters, if nobody feels the loss of that main character, if I don't feel the loss of that main character, then I haven't done my job to create a compelling character that somebody wants to feel for or will miss when they're gone. I guess I kind of look at myself as both the writer and the reader in that aspect. I don't really take the reader into account when I kill somebody off, and are they going to be really mad at me if I kill this person or not? It's more like, are they going to be sad? Are they going to be angry because that character's gone? Or are they just going to go, oh, okay, yeah, he had to go. He was annoying. I didn't like him. He was the Jar Jar Binks of the series. Let's just get rid of him. Like that's not what I want. So I try and remember how I feel. I try and get into the feel of it.
Okay, so have you ever had any readers react badly to your killing a character off?
Yes. In one of my series in Tor for Realm Wardens, I kill off a character there that hurt me deeply. I wanted this character actually to be further along in the series. Unfortunately, that was their end. I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to, spoilers. But yeah, I got a couple of nasty grams about killing them off. And it wasn't like a threat, I'm going to kill you. It was just like, oh, why'd you do that? Like, I really love that person. And why'd you, and it's like, it was hard on my side too, but they had reached their arc and it had to be done. And so I did get a lot of blowback for that particular character. And it's like, well, I guess I did my job. You loved the character enough that you were angry that I took them out. And so, it's like, sorry, not sorry, but sorry.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on killing family of the protagonist as an overused trope, like the orphan of
yeah.
the
It is highly overused. I'm guilty of it, of myself. It is almost abused. It's used so much, but it's such a good plot point. It's one of the best plot points to push that character into whatever action the rest of the book is going to be about. So as much as it's overused, because it really is, anybody that you read any book, especially young adult or middle grades, especially young adults, they that's the catalyst for any adventure or quest to start. And the parents are dead, and now the child's an orphan. But I don't think that there would be a better way to get that plot moving for that quest or whatever the protagonist needs to do in the rest of that book.
So yeah. So in some cases, I agree with it. In some cases, I think it's used for sympathy purposes. So how do you avoid making a family death seem like it's being used as a trope or being used for sympathy while
Like
still,
forced, like it
yeah,
feels forced. Like I'm okay. You're gonna feel bad about this now. Like
yeah, it's like
it,
an easy way to create sympathy for the protagonist.
you really do need to make sure that the audience knows the protagonist enough that when you do kill off their parents, it makes a difference. Just killing the parent off, it's like, really, you're trying to make me sad, and that just bugs me. Like you're trying to force that emotion onto me. And so the parent's death, although it's serving a purpose for that protagonist, it has to have meaning. There has to be an emotional attachment in some way. It's not just okay, well, we're going to slit their throats and get them out of the way. It's like, but why? Why did that happen? Like there has to be an absolute purpose behind it. Otherwise, you're trying to make me feel a certain way that I'm not ready to feel yet. because I haven't grown to know these people. I haven't grown to know the antagonist, because usually those forced ones are very, very early on. They're within the first chapter of the book. And it's like, I don't know this person, so why do I care that they lost their parents? So it's a tricky balance of being overused, but to be overused in a good way, to properly use it instead of just, okay, well, we're going to do this so that this character can go do that. It's like, no, you have to have a purpose.
Okay, so when you kill off family members of the protagonist, sometimes you have other family members that survive as well. So have you ever written them, and how do you handle them as characters?
I have to think. I don't think there was no surviving members of the family. It was the parents, Kaylee's parents. She was an only child, so it was just her. So I don't think I've written, but I would assume that it would be, if I was to write a family member outside of the protagonist that survived it, they could go either way. They could either shut down completely and I want nothing more to do with this. I just want to bury the parents, let it go. We need to move on. Or you could go with they turn into the stark raving mad, I'm going to kill everybody in sight. And the protagonist's job is to try and calm that sibling down and try and quell whatever it is that they're doing. So I've personally never written where a parent or a child is killed and there's an additional sibling to deal with in it. So I'm not sure. That might be something I have to think about writing. I'm not sure whether you would want to possibly write them out, kind of write them out of the story where they were there and then the protagonist goes off on their quest to resolve and the sibling stays behind, and then you never really hear about the sibling again until much later, or there's reference to there being a sibling. But I've never, that's a tough question. I've never written it. So
yeah, your suggestions do bring up an interesting point, though. You could use the sibling as a contradiction to the protagonist, even like as a secondary antagonist almost.
Yeah, like that would be, because now the protagonist is having to resolve with whoever killed the family or the parents and having to deal with the sibling that maybe has become murderously rageous. And it's like, okay, I'll take care of this. Why don't you just settle down? So yeah, it could be an interesting turn of events. It could be a plot twist even, that you find out that all of these bodies being left behind is from the sibling and not, or even the sibling killed the parents. It's hey, I'm coming up with ideas on the fly.
Okay, so now we're going to go over to just some fun questions here. So what is the most creative death you've ever given a character?
I had someone sliced completely in half where they were hit with a katana, where it went from the bottom left rib all the way up through the top of their skull. So they were their whole bodies just kind of slid into two pieces. I've a lot of disembowelments. I like disembowelments, apparently. I do a lot of sword play, so along those lines. I don't know if I'm all that creative with the deaths.
That sounds creative
to me. Lots of beheadings. But I think the most grotesque would probably be the removal of the eyes and someone getting their heart cut out and placed in front of them as it stopped beating. Yeah. when I'm in the moment, I'm in the moment, like, okay, we're going to go all full force on this one. I think that's about as creative as I can get, is that. Yeah.
That's very creative. Excellent. Okay, so what's the oddest thing you've researched and related to a character death?
It actually wasn't one of my character deaths. I was beta reading for someone once, and they were the person was being tied up to be thrown on the bottom of the lake, and they had made a reference to why cement blocks were being tied to their feet. And it was a conversation between two characters. And I had to Google what happens to a body if it is thrown into a body of water and how long it would take to float to the surface and why does it float to the surface and does it float first. And yeah, my Google search was really harsh. It's like to discover, the facts behind having having how, if you were to toss a
Yeah.
body into a river and how to prevent it from popping back up and why does it pop back up and how long does it take and yeah, that's
Yeah, I watch a lot of true crime shows, so I know the answers there.
that is like,
And
oh,
also, this is an interesting fact, although I'm not sure the viewers won't probably think
find
it's
it.
gross, but if the body's in the water long enough, I know this applies to the ocean. I'm not sure if it applies to freshwater, but the skin will actually kind of slip off, and
Yeah.
it's hard. Yeah,
Yep, yep, it's the gases that
mm,
collect in the yeah, I'm just like, "Oh, I don't why do I don't need to know that, it wasn't even from my book," and I'm just like, "Ah." But yeah, that's I think that's the worst I've ever that and trying to figure out how to describe the smell of burning flesh. Those are the 2 things where it's like, "Why am I writing this?" Because the deep holes that you get into trying to find that information is like, I'm gonna have nightmares. Like, yeah.
okay. So, do you have a favorite weapon to use when writing a death scene?
Swords. I do. I love I think that's why I write fantasy, in like a medieval type setting because I love swordplay. I love swords and knives and because I think
Yeah,
they're more you get more personal than with a gun. So, yeah, swords. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Blades are one of my favorite weapons too. So
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here, and I'd like to thank you for being our guest today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And that's it for this episode of Words That Kill. And be sure to join us next time for a new episode. And that's all for now. Bye.